Well, as I think many of your listeners, many of your viewers will know, there are many different lineages of meditation that come from Buddhism. And what is very distinctive about Tibetan Buddhism and within Tibetan Buddhism, the Tantra or Vajrayana, is that it's somatically oriented. Most other meditative traditions are what we call top-down traditions, which means that they begin with a particular goal in mind, and they use various kinds of techniques to tame the mind, control the mind, and bring themselves into a space that is calm and open and pleasurable. And those are all wonderful traditions. But the Tantra is quite different, because the Tantra actually begins with the body rather than beginning with the conscious mind. The viewpoint of the Tantra is that the human body is a realm of awakening, meaning that when we begin to connect with our bodies and we begin to explore the interior space, we begin to find that at the very foundation of our experience is a field of awareness that is, it's very visceral. It's discovered within the body, and it's felt in a very tangible and concrete way, but it's a space that is empty and open and ultimately without any boundaries at all. The difference between the Tantra and other schools of meditation that might talk in the same way is that in the Tantra, that space is discovered in a fully experiential and visceral way. It's discovered as actually the basis of your human incarnation. And that's a very, very powerful and very grounding discovery. I would say that, of course it has a goal. And I would say the goal is to begin to tap into the enlightenment of the body, or to tap into the fundamental awakening that is within the body itself. So it's a matter of connecting with the depth of the wisdom that's in our body, which is very open-ended. It's not setting up any particular preconception about what that might look like. Well, this is a very important question. We have to make a distinction between the body that we normally experience as human beings, particularly in modern culture, and then the body that we discover when we learn certain awareness practices that help us bring our consciousness within the body. So what I'm getting at is that the way we normally experience our body is through a filter of judgments and interpretations and labels created by our left brain or our thinking mind. Pretty much we view all experience through that filter, and that's why so often our experience appears to be drab and rather limited. There's a term in neurobiology which is interoception, which means it involves setting aside what we think we experience in the body, taking the stance that actually we don't know what our body is, and we're going to have to make a journey to discover what the direct experience of the body is, not the conceptualized, labeled, judgmental version, but the naked, non-conceptual experience of the body. So we're going to set aside our thinking mind, and we are going to begin to direct our awareness into various parts of our body, and we can work with direct our awareness to aspects of our skin, to musculature, to internal organs, and to areas of the body such as the lower belly or the navel or the heart or the throat, all of which are independent centers of intelligence, which we know through neurobiology as well as Tantra, that we can connect with. So what happens when we practice interoception, or putting our awareness into our body, we discover that the direct experience, the naked experience of our body, when we do that, is completely different from what we've ever thought or imagined our body to be. So it's a discovery of a different kind of body. It's a different way of connecting with this body of ours. And what we find within the body, as we're going to see in the meditation I want to lead you in, we find that the most fundamental experience of this limited body of ours is a space, an awareness that underlies everything that we perceive or think or feel, that is not only empty and open, but that we ourselves can enter when we touch that very deep level of unconditioned awareness in our body. We feel free. That's where we find freedom. We find it within our human body, and not by going somewhere else. I talked about the left brain, the thinking mind, and that's the part of our system that captures experience and judges it, labels it, puts it into categories, evaluates it, and attaches stories to it. In contrast to the thinking mind is what we call the soma. The soma is what used to be called the right brain. So we have left brain, right brain. Left brain is the thinking mind. Right brain is the mind of direct experience, the non-conceptual mind. But actually, we know now, and something Dan Siegel has pushed on, the neuropsychologist, we know now that actually there's the left brain, and then there is the right brain. There is the emotional center, the amygdala. There is the brain stem, which is a source of our experience. There is the throat, the heart, the navel center, the lower belly, the sexual center, all of which are parts of our body that possess knowledge in a direct way, not a mediated way. And then, frankly, all the way down to the 6 trillion cells in our body, each of which has its own awareness. So soma includes all of that. It includes everything that's not the thinking mind. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Everything that knows reality, knows experience, knows other people in a direct, stripped down, unmediated, non-conceptual, naked way. Yes, another very, very good question. All the Buddhist schools of meditation will use some kind of physical reality to pay attention to in order to calm the mind. And sometimes, often it's the body itself. It could be the lower belly, could be breath at the tip of the nose. Sometimes it's an external object like a candle flame, or you can put a dot of, on a piece of paper, a little black dot, and you can focus on that. So all the schools use the body or some physical representation as a starting point for meditation. But then from there they go to into states that I would say are not necessarily embodied. In other words, they go into mental states that may be quite separate from the body and also not include the body. And the interesting point there is, what somatic meditation does, it starts by breathing into the lower belly, but then rather than using that as a stepping stone to a mental state that is outside of that, it actually uses the lower belly as a gate to go deeper into the body. So somatic meditation, it gives up any sense of trying to cultivate a particular state of mind, and it prioritizes the experience of the body rather than the experience of the conscious meditator. When we do that, all kinds of doors open. And at that point, rather than the conscious meditator being the manager of the meditative process, the body itself becomes the manager of the meditative process. And we follow the lead of the body, we follow the dictates of the body, we follow the sensations of the body deeper and deeper into our somatic existence, and then we begin to discover all kinds of worlds opening up, worlds of peace and freedom and openness. I know it sounds strange to talk about the human body as being a gateway to for example, touching eternity, but that's the teaching of Tantra. That's how it works. The body is the one and only gateway to the totality of what is, and to being present to the universe in every aspect. Well, one of the big, I would say, conundrums, riddles of meditation practice is the question of what is the relationship of the goal of most meditation, which is a state of peace and openness, to all of the unresolved issues and experiences of our ordinary human life here. Many people feel that meditation is a way to distance ourselves from, the pain and the tumult and the chaos, of our, what we call our traumas. The Vajrayana approach is actually the exact opposite. The Vajrayana approach says that any meditative state that you attain that doesn't include the totality of your somatic being, and in particular, all of your unresolved emotional issues, any meditative state like that is happening as an alternative to part of your state of being. And we now know that when we talk about our traumas, every human person has been through endless traumas, beginning probably from conception, including birth, early years and later. Some of us, the traumas have been so fierce and so disabling that we become completely incapacitated. But nobody is free of all kinds of pain and torment and fear and anxiety and hopelessness, bubbling under the surface. No one is free of it. And the Vajrayana basically says, when you are not including the depth of your own emotional life in your meditation practice as part of your process, you are using a huge amount of your psychic energy to keep all of those experiences at bay, even when you seem to be resting in a state that's empty, open, and clear. Basically, probably 90% of your energy, your conscious energy, is tied up making sure that those experiences don't surface and don't take over. That leads to an awareness that while it may seem to be open, it really isn't. It's really constricted. This is a Vajrayana point of view. It's what we call the second veil in Vajrayana Buddhism. The only way to be truly free is to be willing to open the door, open the gate for the arrival of all of the unfinished experiences, all of the traumas, all of the parts of ourselves that have been exiled into the dungeons of our unconscious. And it's a step-by-step process. Nobody's talking here about just, being overwhelmed. But through using the somatic practices of meditation, we make room for the arrival of the parts of ourselves that need to be healed. And the only way, as we know from neurobiology, to make room for it is, number one, we have to connect with our body, because the body is and bodily sensations and our visceral experience is the only gateway to the amygdala or the emotional brain. And then number two, being so deeply rooted in our body, to make room for these unresolved parts of ourselves to surface. And through that process, we rest in this deep open space that I've been talking about at the very depth of our body. We could call it the basic witness. We could call it the basic self. We could call it the Buddha nature. We learn how to rest in that fundamental freedom, and at the same time to experience these guests that come knocking at the door that may be very ugly and very misshapen and very filled with fear and suffering, from our early years. By welcoming them, and by being willing to tolerate their presence within our awareness, they become resolved and they are healed. That's the process of integration. That's the Vajrayana approach. And through that, more and more and more, we resolve all of this pressure of all of these parts of ourselves that want to be healed, and our awareness becomes bigger and more free and more vast. At the same time, it's completely grounded in our body. It's said in that and this maybe is a little bit chauvinistic, but I'll just report the tradition, says that most Buddhist schools of meditation, it will take you incalculable eons to achieve full realization, because you have to work very slowly. In the Vajrayana, it said that by working directly with your, in our language, traumas, the path to realization is actually really quite expeditious and quick. The joy that comes from being able to welcome our shadow side, the prisoners who are locked in the dungeons and being in the torture chambers of our deepest self, the joy that comes from being able to welcome them and integrate them and befriend them is it's immeasurable. And again, it's not the joy of being, in a kind of free and open space. It's the joy of being free to experience everything that we are in our life. So it's a very inspiring message, and also it's a challenging path, as you well know. The first veil, all the Buddhist schools work with, and that the first veil is called the veil of emotional upheavals. And we all have emotional upheavals and meltdowns. We get upset, we get angry, and we can use meditation to calm ourselves down. And we know that, we know this about ourselves. I know, I tend to get irritable, or I tend to get, I'm going too fast, or I'm not paying attention to things. I know this. But there's, and so those obstacles are worked with by all the schools of Buddhist meditation. But this other one, the second veil, they are really what we call trauma today. They are the unconscious mental attitudes, the unconscious emotional assumptions about how reality is. It's our unquestioning belief how people are, and we all have these. We all have a certain way of experiencing the world, and we think that's the way the world is, and that's what it means to say they're unconscious. We think, maybe in my case, I grew up thinking that, people are unreliable, and nobody's really going to love me, and a distrust in intimate relationships based on my early experiences. But I didn't have direct access to that. It's just how I thought the world was. Those would be examples. Or somebody who feels that the world is a very, very fearful and dangerous place. Or somebody who feels that the world is like a meat market and you can just go and you can get whatever you want if you're aggressive enough. These are all second veil issues, and they are unquestioned, unconscious assumptions that we carry around. And you can see the problem is, if you have those, you can see how it limits your experience completely, because, in my case, how could, intimate relationships are, such an important part of life, and to have the assumption that they're not real, that they're dangerous and they're phony, it's terribly limiting, or any of the other ones. So what happens, and this, by the way, it's exactly when we talk about trauma, that's what trauma is. It's the whole battery of unconscious assumptions that resides in our unconscious, which is our body. So I find it very, very interesting that the techniques of Vajrayana parallel and in many respects actually surpass a lot of the techniques that are used by somatic therapists for bringing to light these unconscious assumptions and helping us resolve them. Well, let me say what I don't mean. I don't mean what we used to think of as enlightenment, which is some kind of state of being that is outside of life. I don't mean that. And I don't even mean attaining any kind of steady state in one's being, which is often how we think about it. If you're a realized person, you don't have any problems, nothing ever comes up, you're in a state of bliss all the time. I'm not talking about that. That is, it's not a bad realization, but it's not permanent. What I mean by realization is through the process that we've been talking about here of connecting with the infinite openness of our own body and making room for all of the experiences that arise when that openness is there and working through them, we come to a point, I think, where we see that everything that comes up in our life, even these prisoners from the deep dungeons where they're imprisoned and being tortured, even as we speak, even those prisoners arrive and they are bringing a gift, and the gift is their own intelligence, what they've been through, what they know about life, their energy, their tenderness and love that was hurt very early on. They bring these enormous gifts. And we begin to develop this, what Chogyam Trungpa, my teacher, called absolute positivity, which means that everything that happens in our life makes us bigger people, more open people, makes our awareness, enables our awareness to be more vast, brings us to be more loving, enables us to appreciate life more in all of its dimensions. And that leads us to a point where life, the way it actually is on this planet, in this body, with this karma, is it's a joyful experience, and it's a positive experience, and it's a sacred experience. To live within the realm of what life actually is and to find within that freedom and joy is realization from the Vajrayana point of view. It's the utter sacredness of this life of ours, and nothing is excluded. That's the important point. However troubled, however deeply wounded we have been, all of it is bringing us into a depth of appreciation of what it means to be human. In other words, to fully realize our human life is to be realized.